So, here's the deal. I'm 17 years old, and recently, I did something that has everyone upset with me, and I'm feeling really confused about the whole situation. For the past few weeks, I've been living alone with my dad because my mom had to travel to LA for work. My parents, my mom's 42 and my dad's 48, got married around the time they found out they were expecting me, and they've been together ever since. My mom had never been married before, and I'm her first kid. My dad, however, has another daughter from a previous relationship. Let's talk about my half sister for a sec. We'll call her Emily. She's 22, and honestly, we've never really hit it off. She comes off as pretty annoying and entitled. My dad and Emily's mom weren't together very long, just about a year, and they weren't married. They were actually thinking about breaking up, but then they found out Emily's mom was pregnant, which kind of threw a wrench in those plans. They tried to stick it out for the sake of the baby, but it didn't work. Their relationship fell apart not long after Emily was born, but they did manage to set up a co-parenting plan. Emily grew up bouncing back and forth between her mom's place and our house every week. So, that's a bit of the background on the family dynamics leading up to the current drama I'm tangled in. I'm just trying to figure out where things went wrong and what I should think about all this mess. About 3 years after Emily was born, my dad met my mom at a work conference and they hit it off. They started dating, and 2 years later, they got married, and then I came along. Even though my dad had Emily from his previous relationship, my mom was totally fine with that and embraced the situation. However, growing up, Emily and I just never clicked. Our dad did everything he could to try and make us bond or at least be friendly with each other, but it just didn't work out. We were very different, and honestly, we felt more like distant acquaintances than siblings. We definitely weren't close, and we didn't really act like sisters or even friends. As we got older, it seemed like even my dad came to terms with the fact that Emily and I weren't going to be close, so he stopped pushing for it, which kind of relieved some of the pressure at home. Aside from the awkwardness with Emily, I had a really good relationship with my dad. I was pretty close to him, and I loved the time I spent at home with my parents. Well, when Emily wasn't there. It's not that I didn't want her around at all. It's just that when she came over, she tended to dominate the attention. Since my dad only saw her on weekends, it made sense that she got most of the spotlight during her visits, but it still bugged me how the whole dynamic at home would change. It felt like I suddenly became less visible, and that was tough to handle. Given that Emily only visited our dad on weekends, it made sense that he'd focus more on her during those times. She'd soon be heading back to her mom's, and my dad wanted to make the most of their limited time together. I understood this, but it didn't stop me from feeling a bit sidelined. Deep down, I knew there was a bit of sibling rivalry going on, even though Emily might never admit to it. Despite this, I have to acknowledge that my dad really did his best and was a good father to both of us. As we grew older, I gradually began to care less about competing with Emily or trying to outdo her in any way. However, it seemed like she never really moved past that rivalry phase. Even after she started college, she continued to behave in ways that felt pretty childish to me. She'd come home and brag about the prestigious college she attended. Mind you, I was only 13 at the time, so college was not even on my radar yet. She'd go on about her grades, trying to prove how smart she was, or talk endlessly about all the fun she was supposedly having at college. It felt like she was always trying to one-up me, or seek validation through these boasts. This behavior struck me as both weird and unnecessary. Sometimes I'd respond by poking fun at her bragging right to her face, which I knew annoyed her. I guess in those moments, I was trying to knock the wind out of her sails a bit, to get her to realize how she was coming across. The subtle, passive-aggressive conflicts Emily and I had were ongoing, but everything changed dramatically a couple of years ago. It was just about a week before Emily was set to graduate when we received the devastating news that her mother had passed away suddenly from a heart attack. It was a huge blow, especially since her mom was under 50 and seemingly in the prime of her life. The stress of her lifestyle had taken a toll, and despite doctors warning her to get regular checkups and make some changes, she hadn't taken steps to address her health issues. We were all shocked by her passing, partly because no one in the family even knew she had been dealing with heart problems for a long time. She had kept her struggles to herself. This loss hit Emily particularly hard. After her mom's funeral, I noticed a significant change in her behavior, but unfortunately, it wasn't for the better. Emily began to binge eat, developing what seemed to be an eating disorder. Initially, the signs were subtle, but as time went on, they became more apparent. She was living with us at the time, and I found myself in a position where I felt I needed to step up. Observing her struggle, I approached my dad, not to mock her, but out of genuine concern. I told him that I was worried about Emily and suggested that perhaps we should look into getting her some help. It was a delicate situation, but I felt it was important to address her health issues before they worsened. I was genuinely worried for Emily because her behavior was spiraling out of control. Concerned for her well-being, My dad and I spent a lot of time researching and discussing how we could help her. We agreed that it was crucial for her to consider therapy, as it was clear that things couldn't continue as they were. However, when my dad approached Emily about the idea of getting professional help, she was far from receptive. She reacted defensively and lashed out, accusing me of using her situation as a means to seek attention for myself. She even went as far as to suggest that I was trying to label her as crazy, just to undermine her. It was hurtful to hear, especially because my intentions were genuinely about her safety and health, not about creating drama. Despite her initial resistance and the painful accusations thrown my way, we persisted. The discussions were filled with rebellion and bargaining, but eventually, Emily saw the seriousness of her condition. Her health had deteriorated significantly, and she had gained a lot of weight in a short period, which was not healthy. Reluctantly, Emily agreed to seek help. It was a tough journey, but over the next several months, we began to see some positive changes. By then, Emily had already graduated, but had been unable to start her career due to depression, compounded by the grief of losing her mother. It was a challenging time for her, but about a year after her mother's passing, Emily started to feel a bit more like herself and decided it was time to look for a job. Remarkably, she managed to find one within a few weeks. This progress was a huge relief. It showed that despite the initial resistance and the complex emotions involved, taking steps towards recovery was possible, and Emily was finally on a path to rebuilding her life post-therapy. Despite our rocky relationship, I have to admit that Emily was a pretty good student with excellent grades, which probably helped her land a job quickly. In just a few months, she moved out. And honestly, I thought she'd be settling into her new independent life. However, about half a year later, she surprised us all by deciding she didn't want to live on her own anymore and wanted to move back home. I was puzzled by her decision, especially since she could afford her own place. But Emily has always been unpredictable, and since her mother's passing, my dad has been particularly lenient and supportive of her, almost to the point of coddling her. So, when she expressed her desire to return, he agreed immediately without any hesitation. Around the same time, my family was going through changes of our own. We had just moved out of our old place and bought a new house. The main reason for buying instead of continuing to rent was to finally have something of our own. We had only moved in a couple of weeks ago, and we weren't even done unpacking when my mom got a massive work opportunity in LA. She had to leave almost immediately, which left my dad and me to handle the rest of the unpacking. Our new house is quite spacious, with 4 bedrooms. The plan was for one to be mine, one for my parents, and the other 2 designated for guests. However, with Emily moving back, I had a feeling that our original plans for the guest rooms might have to change. This adjustment was another layer to adapt to in our already changing family dynamic. With Emily's unexpected decision to move back home, our new house's room arrangements suddenly became a bit complicated. One of the guest rooms was naturally intended for her, while the other was meant for any other guests we might have. However, since we hadn't fully settled into our new home, one of the guest rooms was temporarily being used as a storeroom and was completely uninhabitable, filled with boxes and various unpacked items. The second guest room, which was empty, didn't even have a bed yet. Our previous house had come pre-furnished, which made the move there quite straightforward since we didn't need to buy much in the way of furniture. But this new house didn't come with any furnishings, and my parents had already stretched their budget with the purchase of the house itself. Therefore, buying a new bed and furnishing 2 rooms that we didn't expect to need anytime soon didn't seem like a priority. So, we left the second guest room empty, never imagining that Emily would suddenly decide to move back. This all came to a head about 2 weeks ago when my dad informed me that Emily would be moving in, and due to the current state of the guest rooms, I would have to share my room with her. This news really upset me. I'm 17 years old and really value my privacy, not to mention that Emily and I have never gotten along very well. I've always found her pretty annoying, and the thought of sharing my personal space with her was something I was definitely not looking forward to. Sharing a room felt like a huge invasion of my space, especially with someone I frankly didn't like. The whole situation at home was really stressing me out. I argued a lot with my dad about Emily moving in and even tried to get my mom involved, hoping she might support my side. But all she said was that she was too busy with work and thought I was being petty. She pointed out that Emily had just lost her mother and was trying to find her footing again, implying that I should be more supportive rather than rejecting her. My dad echoed similar sentiments, telling me it was my moral duty to make Emily feel welcome in our home, accusing me of acting like a brat. I felt this was really unfair. I didn't see myself as acting bratty, rather, I felt Emily was being the entitled one here. She had a job, she was earning her own money, so it seemed reasonable to expect her to live on her own, at least until we could furnish the other room. I even thought, Why couldn't Emily just buy a bed herself if she wanted to move back so badly? That way, she could stay in the other room and we'd both have our own space. But the reasons she gave for wanting to move back were that she felt lonely and was trying to save money. She mentioned she was planning to quit her job soon to start her own small business, and moving back home would help her save up faster. I suggested, maybe half-heartedly, that she could sleep on the couch temporarily. But Emily immediately dismissed that idea, saying it would be too uncomfortable and could aggravate her back problems, which had been an issue during her struggle with her weight. The whole conversation felt like it was going nowhere, and I was left feeling frustrated and unheard. It seemed like no matter what I said, the decision had already been made, and I would just have to deal with having Emily as a roommate for the foreseeable future. So there I was, stuck sharing my room with Emily, and to make matters worse, I was the one who had to sleep on the floor in my own room. Emily seemed to be quite content with the arrangement, and this only added to my frustration. She moved in about a week and a half ago, and it has been an absolute nightmare for me ever since. Living with Emily has been incredibly difficult, not just because of our strained relationship, but also because she's incredibly messy. This has been driving me crazy. She's also constantly on her phone, talking at the top of her lungs, which makes it super hard for me to concentrate on my studies. I find myself rushing to get all my homework done before she comes home just so I can have a bit of peace and quiet. But the moment I get back from school, my time to relax is cut short because she arrives shortly after, and the chaos resumes. The day she moved in, she turned my room into a complete mess. No matter how often I clean up, it seems like everything is back to square one by the next day. I reached my breaking point last week and brought it up to my dad after dinner, hoping he might understand and help enforce some basic rules about cleanliness and respect for shared spaces. But instead of support, I was met with a dismissive response. He told me to just suck it up and deal with it because Emily was dealing with her own issues. This response felt so unfair. It seemed like my feelings and needs were being completely overlooked because Emily was going through a tough time. I understand that she's had her struggles, but it felt like my own comfort and mental well-being in my living space were being sacrificed without consideration. I was left feeling even more isolated and frustrated, unsure of how to cope with an increasingly difficult home environment. Feeling the weight of my father's words about needing to be supportive as a family, I tried to adjust my mindset. I acknowledged that Emily was facing her own struggles, notably her mother's death and her battle with an eating disorder, which were undoubtedly significant and challenging. With this in mind, I attempted to be more understanding and give her some leeway, despite our strained relationship and the discomfort her behavior caused me. But despite my efforts to be empathetic and accommodating, a recent incident pushed me beyond my limits. It happened 3 days ago. I had spent the day at a friend's house, enjoying a much-needed break, and returning home in the evening in good spirits, ready to relax on a Saturday night without the worry of school the next day. However, my good mood was quickly shattered the moment I stepped into my room. What I saw was shocking. All my clothes were scattered across the floor. As I started picking them up, I noticed that many of my outfits were not just misplaced, but had been stretched out, and even worse, some were torn. I stood there, trying to process why anyone would do such a thing, feeling a mix of anger and confusion. Just then, Emily walked into the room. She saw my face, the mess, and the damaged clothes, and immediately said she could explain. The gravity of the situation and her calm admission that she was involved hit me hard. I was outraged and felt betrayed. This was more than just an annoyance or a petty disagreement. This was personal and invasive. I braced myself to hear her explanation, but I already knew that whatever her reasons were, our already fragile coexistence was about to become even more strained. Emily's confession that she had tried on my clothes because she needed something to wear to a wedding was shocking, especially given the way she presented the information. Her smug expression as she explained her actions made it clear that this was more than just a desperate search for an outfit. It felt like a calculated move to provoke me. She knew very well that her clothes no longer fit her, and she also knew that my clothes would be too small for her. Yet she decided to try them on anyway, fully aware that it would likely stretch or tear them, rendering them unwearable for me. Her actions seemed to be deliberately designed to upset me. She laid out the damaged clothes on the floor for me to find, ensuring that I would see the extent of what she had done the moment I walked into the room. The fact that she was smiling as I processed the chaos she had created added to the cruelty of her actions. It was almost as if she enjoyed the distress she was causing. For a few moments I was too shocked and appalled to react. The sight of my ruined clothes and Emily's unapologetic demeanor was overwhelming, but as the reality of what she had done sunk in, my temper flared beyond my control. I was at my breaking point after continuously being pushed to accommodate her despite her disrespectful behavior. In a moment of intense frustration and anger, I lost my composure and slapped her. It was an impulsive reaction that I immediately regretted, not because it wasn't provoked, but because I pride myself on handling conflicts differently. I had been trying to maintain peace and show understanding, given her personal losses and struggles, but this violation of my personal space and belongings was too much. After the incident, the atmosphere in our home became even more tense. I knew that hitting Emily wasn't the right way to handle the situation, no matter how justified my frustration might have felt at the moment. This act had likely escalated our already strained relationship to a new level of hostility and would need to be addressed. The altercation with Emily quickly escalated beyond just a slap. It turned into a full-blown physical fight. In the heat of the moment, fueled by anger and frustration, both of us ended up hurting each other. I managed to scratch her, and she pulled out chunks of my hair. It was chaotic and aggressive, far from how I usually handle conflicts. Despite not feeling proud of it, part of me felt a twisted sense of satisfaction in standing up for myself, even though I knew deep down that physical fighting wasn't the answer. My dad eventually heard the noise and rushed to intervene. It took him some effort, but he managed to break us apart. I expected him to ask for our sides of the story to understand what led to the fight, but instead, he immediately started scolding me. He didn't give me a chance to explain or justify my actions. He just assumed I was at fault. His immediate reaction was to accuse me of being a spoiled brat ever since Emily moved in. He threatened to send me to live with my grandparents if I didn't change my behavior. According to him, I was being entitled and heartless, constantly tormenting Emily. It was as if he was scolding the wrong person. All the accusations he hurled at me felt like they should have been directed at Emily, not me. I was so taken aback by his one-sided outburst that I couldn't even respond. I just stood there, taking the blame, while Emily watched, seemingly satisfied with how things were turning out. This was a deeply disappointing moment for me. I'd always believed that my father loved us equally and would remain fair and unbiased. But his immediate decision to side with Emily without hearing me out shattered that belief. It hurt to realize that he might have his favorites after all, and it left me feeling isolated and misunderstood in my own home. Feeling overwhelmed by the entire situation and deeply hurt by my father's accusations, I needed to get away from the house to clear my head. So, I grabbed my phone and left, heading to the park to try and cool down. But even walking through the quiet paths of the park didn't do much to ease my frustration and anger. In that moment of intense emotion, I turned to social media as an outlet. I felt like I had no one else to talk to, no one who would understand or take my side in the real world. As I started to type, the words just poured out. I was venting, not really filtering my thoughts, driven by the need to express my feelings to someone, anyone. In my post, I laid it all out. I shared how unfairly I felt I'd been treated by my dad, and how my mom also seemed to be siding with him. They both appeared to believe Emily was this long-suffering figure who deserved everyone's sympathy and support. However, from my perspective, Emily was manipulating her past traumas, her mother's death, and her struggles with an eating disorder, to paint herself as a victim and gain the upper hand at home. I described how this portrayal of Emily as a victim was not only unfair, but was a deliberate strategy on her part to overshadow any of her negative behaviors. It felt wrong to watch her use such a serious and genuine tragedy as a tool for her own benefit, to excuse her actions that were hurting others, particularly me. The post quickly started to attract attention. Friends, acquaintances, and even some strangers began reacting and commenting, offering their thoughts and support. Some were shocked, some empathized, and others shared their own similar experiences. As I saw the responses coming in, I felt a mix of relief that I was finally being heard, and anxiety about the repercussions this public disclosure might have. I knew this could escalate things further with my family, but in that moment of hurt, it felt necessary to have my side of the story heard. As I walked back home after venting out all my feelings on social media, I braced myself for the inevitable confrontation that awaited me. The 2-hour walk had given me some time to cool down, but also left me anxious about the fallout from my post. My phone had died, so I was completely cut off from any responses or messages that might have been pouring in. When I arrived home, the tension was palpable. As soon as I stepped through the door, my dad and Emily immediately started questioning me aggressively about where I had been and why I had made the post. They were clearly upset and demanded an explanation. Despite the intense atmosphere, I tried to maintain my composure. I explained to them that everything I wrote in the post was a true reflection of how I felt. The frustration had been building up for a long time, and I felt it was necessary to express myself because living with them had become unbearable. I told them that I couldn't continue to live in such a toxic environment, especially with Emily's behavior, which included not only her manipulative acts, but also her lack of basic cleanliness and respect for shared spaces. The conversation quickly escalated. My father was furious and threatened to kick me out of the house for publicly airing our private issues and for my harsh words about Emily. It was a crushing moment because I realized just how deeply the divide had grown between us. I had hoped that expressing my feelings might lead to some understanding or a change in the household dynamics, but instead, it seemed to have solidified my dad's siding with Emily. Feeling cornered and misunderstood, I stood my ground, reiterating that my intention was not to hurt anyone, but to make my struggles known. I was reaching a breaking point, and something had to change if I was to continue living in that house. The situation was tense, and I knew that navigating this conflict would require careful handling and possibly some outside help if our family was to heal and move forward from this point. In the heat of the moment, as Emily began to cry, perhaps to garner sympathy and make my situation worse, my dad's reaction intensified. He demanded a public apology from me, similar in scale to the post I had made, insisting that it was the only way to rectify the situation. He expressed deep disappointment in me, saying he was ashamed and had expected better. I was infuriated. The unfairness of the situation was overwhelming. Here I was being scolded and threatened with eviction over expressing my feelings, while Emily's manipulative behavior seemed to go unnoticed and unpunished. When I defiantly told him I wouldn't apologize, he gave me an ultimatum: apologize or leave his house. According to him, my behavior was unacceptable, and there had to be consequences for my actions. In a fit of anger and frustration, I blurted out that he didn't even have the authority to kick me out because the house was actually owned by my mom. I immediately regretted saying it. It was something I had discovered by accident while searching through some of my mother's things shortly after we moved in. I was actually looking for something of mine that I thought might have gotten mixed up with her belongings. This revelation made the situation even more tense. I hadn't meant to disclose this piece of information, especially not in such a contentious way. It was supposed to be a private matter, and now it was thrown into the middle of an already volatile argument. This slip of the tongue could potentially have serious repercussions, not just for me, but for the family dynamics as a whole. Now, with everything out in the open, I braced myself for the fallout. It was clear that resolving these issues would require more than just heated arguments. It would need calm, constructive conversation, and possibly mediation to find a way forward that respected everyone's feelings and rights. Discovering the deed to our house, with only my mom's name on it, had been an accidental but shocking find. I had stumbled upon it while looking for something else, and although it raised questions, I chose not to delve deeper or bring it up with anyone. I figured that my parents must have discussed this arrangement between themselves, and as long as it didn't affect my living situation, I didn't see a reason to stir potential trouble. However, during the heated argument with my dad, this piece of information just slipped out. Initially, he didn't believe me and accused me of lying, which prompted me to challenge him to check the deed himself. It was kept in his bedroom, a place he could easily access, but he had never felt the need to look at it before because he had trusted my mom with handling all the paperwork. When I mentioned the deed during our argument, it clearly caught him off guard. He rushed to the bedroom to verify my claim, and Emily, who had been in the middle of her emotional display, was just as stunned and momentarily stopped her theatrics. Moments later, my dad emerged from the bedroom, his face flushed with embarrassment and disbelief after finding out that I was telling the truth. He confronted me, asking how long I had known about the deed. I admitted that I had been aware of it since we moved into the house. This revelation seemed to deflate him. He retreated to his room, abandoning the argument with me, perhaps realizing the complexity of the situation, or feeling betrayed that such a crucial detail about our home had been kept from him. Even Emily, caught off guard by the unfolding drama, quietly went back to our shared room. Feeling uneasy about returning to a room with her after everything that had happened, I chose to spend the night on the couch. The couch became my temporary refuge, a place to escape the tension and gather my thoughts after such an intense and revealing conflict. Sleeping on the couch wasn't ideal, but it was still better than the floor, and it didn't exacerbate any back problems for me. However, any hope for a restful night vanished when, just a few hours after my revelation to my dad, I received an urgent call from my mom. She was furious. Right off the bat, she scolded me for disclosing the information about the house without consulting her first. She explained that the house had actually been a gift from her parents in celebration of her and my dad's recent wedding anniversary. My grandparents wanted to do something special for them, and this house was their grand gesture. The money my parents would have spent on purchasing the house had instead been funneled into their retirement savings. My mom had been orchestrating an elaborate surprise, planning to reveal all of this to my dad during a second honeymoon to the Greek islands, funded by the savings from the house. This surprise had been in the works for months, and my careless words had inadvertently spoiled it. Worse yet, my revelation had sparked a significant misunderstanding and conflict between my parents. My dad, upset and feeling out of the loop, believed that my mom should have been upfront about such a significant matter rather than planning it as a surprise. The situation was now dire enough that my mom had to interrupt her crucial work assignment to return home and attempt to repair the rift that had formed in her marriage because of my outburst. The weight of my actions hit me hard. Not only had I spoiled a significant moment for my parents, but I had also added stress and strife to their relationship at a time when they should have been celebrating. Now, filled with regret and seeing the broader repercussions of my impulsive decision to speak out during a heated moment, I realized how important it is to handle sensitive information more carefully. The need to mend things with Emily seemed trivial in comparison to the unintended chaos I had unleashed within my family. I braced myself for my mom's return, knowing that I had a lot to make up for and hoping that somehow I could help soothe the tensions I had helped create. After my mom told me she was disappointed in me, I felt like that was the tipping point. That day was already pretty bad, and her words just made it feel like everyone was against me. I felt super isolated since then because nobody at home is talking to me. I even deleted that social media post I made, hoping it might help fix things, but nothing changed. I still feel like an outsider in my own home. My dad is acting like I'm practically invisible, and I haven't heard a peep from my mom except for her saying she was disappointed. She's away for work, but I know when she gets back and talks to my dad, I'm probably going to hear a lot more about how upset they are. So right now, our house is like super quiet, just filled with this awkward silence, and I guess I just have to deal with it. Maybe some of it is my fault. I've been doing a lot of thinking, probably too much. I keep going over everything again and again, wondering if I could have handled things better. Like, maybe if I hadn't tried to get back at Emily, none of this would have blown up like it did. I'm not saying I regret standing up for myself when I found my clothes all messed up. That felt necessary at the moment, even though it seems less important now compared to all the drama that followed. But making that public post about my dad and Emily, that was probably a step too far. I guess I was just so fed up after being treated poorly for so long that I snapped. I felt like I needed to vent and let people know what was going on, but airing our family's dirty laundry in public wasn't the right way to do it. Now, I'm not even sure if saying sorry would fix anything, or if it's too late for apologies to even matter. So here I am, wondering if I was the jerk for making that post and calling out my dad and Emily because they were making me share a room with her, which was super frustrating. What do you think? Update 1. Hi. Thank you guys so much for all the supportive comments and messages. I'm really grateful for all of it. And yeah, that really helped me make sense of things, and I'm doing a lot better mentally right now. I guess the fact that things have been sorted out with my parents also helps. It's been a week since I posted, and a couple of days after my post, my mother returned and we decided to have a family meeting and finally clear the air between us. Interestingly enough, that was done at a time when Emily was not at home. And even more curiously, it was my father who suggested that we do it when Emily was not at home. So they took a day off of work and waited for her to go to work. And then we decided to talk. It was kind of uncomfortable for me, but I shared my feelings with them, and everything that I said here I told them. They actually seemed to understand, which I didn't think was possible, but they told me that they could understand where I was coming from. And then my father told me that after the huge blow-up that he had with me, he decided to talk to Emily about certain things. And he realized that everything that I had said was true, and he had been a fool all along. Apparently, she had been laying it on thick and had been trying to manipulate him against me after a fight. He didn't understand what was going on, but she kept making up stuff. And after a certain point even, he knew that I was not capable of doing such things. And he could tell that something was weird. Once he figured out that she had been trying to play us all, he decided that he could no longer trust his gut about this, and decided that he was going to talk to us in person. My parents had already sorted things out between them, and they were okay with the deed and the retirement fund and everything. So this is the only thing that we actually had to discuss. After some deliberation, my parents decided that it would be for the best if we told Emily to leave, because what she had done was unacceptable, and she actually had been milking her mother's demise for something so petty that it was distasteful. So to sum it up, Emily has been asked to leave, and she threw a huge fit about it and accused me of trying to sabotage her future, which was interestingly exactly what she had been trying to do to me. So that was clearly projecting. But I finally realized why she hated me so much. It was just because she could, and she was just a terrible person who got off on other people's misery. Mystery solved. Update 2. Hey there. So here's what's going on. Emily has finally moved out, which is a big relief. But now there's another twist. My mom has decided to stick around for a bit longer than planned because she thinks it's super important for our family to start going to therapy together. She's really into making sure we fix some of the stuff that's been making life at home pretty rough lately. My mom is going to be part of the therapy sessions too, but she'll be joining us online. That means she won't be there in the same room, but she'll still be part of the discussions and activities, watching and talking to us through a computer screen. We're all going to give this a shot and really try to work through our problems as a family. I'm keeping my fingers crossed, hoping that these therapy sessions will help us understand each other better and get along better too. The last few months have been really tough, like seriously stressful and not fun at all. I'm just hoping that all of us talking it out with a therapist will help sort things out. I really miss how things used to be, and I'm hoping we can get back to that happier, more chill vibe at home. So yeah, here's hoping everything starts to get better soon with these therapy sessions. Update 3. Hey, I just wanted to share some really exciting news. I'm starting college in a couple of weeks at my top choice school. We're all super excited about it. After what feels like forever, my mom wrapped up her assignment a few months back and has been living with us full time, making our family feel complete again. Since Emily left, we haven't had any contact with her, which has honestly been a relief. Therapy has been going really well too. I feel like everything is finally falling into place, and I couldn't be more grateful to the universe for how things are turning out. It's like a huge weight has been lifted, and I'm just so ready to start this new chapter in college.